This special meeting will be conducted pursuant to the provisions of the Governor's Executive Order N-2920, which suspends certain requirements of the Ralph M. Brown Act. In response to the ongoing COVID-19 outbreak, the district will conduct this Board of Education special meeting as a teleconference. Please use the following toll-free number and meeting ID to call into the meeting. Telephone 669900-9128, meeting ID 893-0416, 2059, passcode 449631, or join on a computer. The link is on our website at TUSD.org. Public comments can be submitted prior to 3 p.m. on the day of the board meeting by completing the appropriate submission form at TUSD.org/BOE/board-meetings under quick links. Participants must be logged in to the meeting with the Zoom link published above or by dialing in, and your Zoom link participant name or phone number must match the phone number on the requested form so that you can be accurately identified. Reasonable accommodations for any individual with a disability can contact my office at 310-972-6001. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Dr. Style. Item number 2, I am calling the meeting to order for the special meeting on budget. 3, adoption of the agenda. Is there anyone who would like to make a motion on that?
I will move that we adopt the agenda.
Second.
Great. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
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 Motion carries. And then moving on to item number 4. Do we have anybody in the public who wants to make a public comment?
There are no comments for this item.
Okay, great. We can skip item 4 and move on to item number 5. Board workshop. Discussion regarding utilization of COVID-19 related one-time funding. Dr. Stowe?
Okay, thank you, Madam President and board members. And it is our pleasure today to bring you significant amount of money that we have received from both state and federal sources that we're going to go through and kind of detail out. Keith and Katie will go through each of them with you and kind of share with you the quantity that we have, some of the regulations and rules behind how some of the dollars need to be spent, and the results of some of the listening work that we've done so far as to what our need is. And then ultimately giving the board about 30 minutes to have a discussion about what is it that you'd like us to focus on? Is there something that we're missing? Are there other priorities that you five would like us to identify in additional work? So with that, I think it's turned over to Keith.
Thanks. Next slide, please, Gil, if you wouldn't mind. So as mentioned, the goal is to provide you some information about the one-time funding and then to discuss the uses of those funds. Next slide, please. So lots of acronyms in this presentation, more than usual. So we do have one slide for you with all of the acronyms. I actually pulled it out because I know I'm going to keep referring to it. So there you have that. And the other is at the top of this page. When we get to Dr. Crumpy's area, there are ideas that have rough magnitude of dollars associated with them. And these are those ranges. So we have not detailed the specific costs yet, but as you can see, depending on the number of dollar signs, just like when you go out to a restaurant, here's what that particular meal of learning is going to cost you, at least within the range of what it looks like. So those will be for the areas of Dr. Crumpy that we get to in a little bit. Next slide, please. So the next 4 slides, I'm going to go through and just talk to you a little bit about the various pots of money as they've come in, roughly what we've spent and why so far. And then we will shift over into more detail with Dr. Crumpy and Dr. McDowell going through exactly what's up with Ed Services, what their plans are, and to get input on that. And I'll do the same thing with some of the funding that we've earmarked for administrative services, largely for ventilation items. So we'll talk about that as we get there. So funding slide number 1. These were our earliest pots overall and where we stand with them. So the very first money that we had was coming in from the state in order to just get some cleaning and PPE and make sure that we could hand meals out to everyone. There was no specific deadline. We got in about $400,000 and that's all spent. in those areas that you see there. Then we got our first of our ESSER money. ESSER, if you go back to the acronyms, Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund. So these were federal funds, and the first ESSER came to us in the CARES Act. Again, 1.8 million in, 1.8 million spent for the same kinds of things: PPE, materials, some of the furniture that we needed to buy, plexiglass, etc. And crossing guards are mentioned. That was something extra that we had to do this year because of coronavirus, COVID, where we needed to have extra crossing guards in the middle of the day because we had the A and the B cohorts. So it's just one of those things we don't think about very much in advance. But I was reminded of the extra need by our partners in the city of Torrance, who said, okay, we can help, but we can't cover the increased cost of this. So we worked out an arrangement with the city of Torrance to split the additional crossing guard cost in the middle of the day. So that's part of where this funding went to. And then the third on this slide is ESSER 2. So that was the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplementary Appropriations Act. And that was the second round of federal funding that came in. You'll see the $6.9 million amount twice, ESSER 2, ESSER 3. We did receive in for both of those pots the same chunk coming in. On this one, I apologize, not on ESSER 3. I'm talking about the AB 86 in-person instructional grant. We'll get to that in a second. But Administrative Services has two $6.9 million chunks we're trying to help with. This is the first of them. And this one is very much for what does it take in terms of getting your buildings back up to shape. We've been fortunate that the buildings themselves, we've done a lot of work with them in terms of modernization funding, obviously, through our bonds and all the money that's come in from the state. But as Dr. Stowe has told me, there was specifically nothing put into bond to deal with new air conditioning in the district or significant upgrades that way other than what needed to be done site by site. But for example, the thinking at the time was, we don't need as much with AC around here. And there was no thinking at the time about what about just fans that we can filter. That just wasn't in our consciousness back then. So for example, when Hull received its wonderful modernization that it got, if you think about it, all of those classrooms just have small windows at the very top that, yes, they can certainly vent out some heat, but in no way is that intended or designed to be a full mechanical air handling situation. So again, this is where we're starting to think we might do some work in terms of how to use these funds. I'll ask you to just kind of hold the questions on that until we get to my shot at the end of this presentation, where I'll detail all of the pieces that we're thinking about with ventilation. But that's where we're looking at with this pot, is to make sure we take care of ventilation. So those are the first of our three pots. Now, all three of these, we've detailed our spending in a hyperlink here. I just put in the hyperlink in case this was up for somebody to get and post at a future date. But this was the LCP, the Learning Continuity Plan, if you remember that the state required for all of these funds that came into us to make sure that we detailed back in September of 2020 what we were going to do with these pots of money. And as you can see, most are spent, except for the pot of money that was detailed for summer school in the next 2 years. But gear was from the governor. That was money he came up with quickly in order to help us with the Emergency Education Relief Fund. Again, summer school coming up for 2 years ahead. And then the rest of these, which had a lot to do with their term, learning loss mitigation. We prefer learning acceleration is what we're trying to do here, but that's what the state called it. And so again, fully detailed in our LCP that the board approved back in September of 20. So you've seen those expenditures. Just in the interest of time, didn't detail those at the moment, but certainly Dr. McDowell or Dr. Crumpy can answer more if needed on those. On the next slide, please, Gil. So this is our second to the last big pot coming in that we know of course, at this point. And as you can see, dollars spent, 0, 0, 0. We're still working with all of these. So this is all about AB 86, state assembly bill that was passed. And there are three portions to that. The first portion is we have to dedicate 1.4 million towards paraprofessionals, individuals who will be working in classrooms mostly to support students directly with their learning. So we're looking at how to do that. And again, as we get to those slides, Our Ed Services folks here will describe in depth what they're planning to do with that. Next big pot of 13.2 million, and then the last pot, the second $6.9 million pot. And again, I'll discuss that a little bit more when we get to the administrative services slide. But as you can see, here's a bunch of money from the state, just announced, coming in, not spent yet. That's our purpose for talking to you today. And the next slide, please. It's got another big chunk unspent. So this is our SR3, the federal funds. You can see we don't even have a resource code yet because those are the most recent funds to come to us. And it's split into two sections, learning loss or learning acceleration, shall we say, and then the main SR3, again, for learning loss. If you total up all the amounts in, it's 59.2 million in, 17 has been spent so far. Again, the vast majority of that within the learning continuity plan. And what we have left is 42.2 million. 30 million of that Ed Services we'll discuss today. 5.3 million I can discuss for administrative services today. And then we have 6.9 million left, which isn't on the table today necessarily, but we'll talk to you again about that when we get to the admin services slide at the end. So just in terms of the pots coming in and the dollar amounts there, any general questions on this, or would you like us to dive into some of the details and questions can come from that?
Does anyone have any questions? I can't see everybody.
Doesn't seem like it at the moment.
Okay.
Okay, so then on to the next slide, and Dr. Crumpy will take it from here.
Terrific. Thanks, Keith. Before we open up the workshop for your contribution, I wanted to share the categories of support that are allowable, and also discuss how we're consulting and doing our listening sessions like with you today. We have already conducted 8 or so with TTA, our parent groups, students on Friday. That's always our favorite, and plan for about 6 or 7 additional listening sessions that will be completed by the first week of May, so that we can come back in mid-May at that board meeting with a completed plan and ask for your approval. This plan has to be uploaded, approved prior or on or before June 1st. Next slide, Gil. So what you see here is just a re-explanation of the monies. It's not different monies. Now we're talking about that specific 30 million-ish of dollars that Keith talked about. And one planning idea that we are considering is to utilize the AB 86 funds first. So starting now, or when they get approved, for this summer and for next school year, as this has an August spending deadline, and so this money expires next August 22. So to utilize this for the next school year is our plan. And then with the almost similar dollar amount for the federal, we'd like to have that then continue on. So we could use that for the 23-24 school year. It sounds like it's so far away, but the 23-24 school year and both of those summers, so that the plan we're putting in place isn't going to be a one and done, but that we can bring on supports for our students over the next 2 years, and maybe with a little bit and giving us time to adjust the needs. We even can spend a little bit of it even after that. So that's kind of our sketched out idea for not just spending this all in 1 year and being able to better help and stretch our dollars. Gil? So there are 7 allowable spending categories for AB 86. And so I'm going to go through what a couple of them are and just touch on some sample expenses. And then maybe some of these are also some of the ideas that have come out in some of the listening sessions. The first one is extending learning time. So both extending it, meaning the school year, so summer opportunities, but also extending the school day before and after school activities. There would be nothing prohibiting us from doing, let's say, even a Saturday reading boot camp, for example. And so you see that is got the triple dollar sign, meaning it's, above $1 million, kind of pricey to be able to put those supports in place. The next one is really pricey. That's the big one. That's 5 million or more. And this is really to do everything within the school day. It's possible that, not knowing what our DPH guidelines are, that if they're the same as they are today, that our maximum number of kids in a classroom would require us to hire additional staffing. That's why this is so expensive. That's the largest set aside. Quite often, especially like in a high school setting, we know we have class averages quite often, and we might have some smaller and some quite large. If we can only put 30 or 32 kids in a classroom at a maximum, then it's possible that we may need some staffing. And all of these things are in order to return to 5 days a week, full day instruction in the fall. There is a 10% set aside for paraprofessionals that comes into this, and any intervention staff, additional class periods or personnel to provide those academic accelerations and supports that are needed for our students. Next slide, Gil. The next one, and this is the last one that's I think that's really pricey, are those all important mental health supports. I think that we can't have a listening session where this doesn't rise to one of the top concerns on everyone's mind. While we know that the accelerated learning that we want to do and filling gaps that students have, I think there's a trust from our stakeholders that we have excellent staff and personnel in place to fill some of those holes. But if we can't make sure that the whole child is well taken care of when they return, then we're not going to be able to work on those academic needs. Ideas that have come into place are to ensure that we may have full-time counseling at the elementary school over the next couple of years. That's one idea that has come up, especially so they can be pushing it into the classroom and providing some not only being reactive, but we want to be proactive and go in and really work on how to re-engage them back into school. Or for our littles, our incoming Ks, really work with them on being in school, especially considering the variance in their and what their learning may look like right now, if they're not in preschool and they've been home. In the middle and high school, some of the ideas being kicked around are to double those extra mental health counselors and supports. We heard a really interesting idea from one of the students on Friday. Can there please be a safe space that we all know we can go to, that if we need some of that time? They asked for even I'm gonna say tiered re-engagement as part of this, and which is kind of an important part, I think, of all of these discussions that we're having. The students have said, and we know this, and we're hearing this from I think our school groups as well, is we know we've got a nice chunk of our kids back part-time right now, back in school, in as normal of a situation that can be permitted under the guidance. We know we're going to offer summer options as approved by the board at tonight's board meeting, hopefully. But we still may have families that on June 21st, when that program is slated to start, might not feel comfortable returning to school. So then the next tier is that school sites would offer kind of a orientation and supports and re-engagement on steroids, session. But even still, we may not have kids returning to school until the first day of school. And so being ready for the social emotional assistance is, as I said, really in every listening group that we have participated in, it is the one that has taken the largest chunk of time, with the most discussion on, with really good ideas as well on how to help our kids. As we know, we may be considering, distance learning options next year, especially considering that, we heard from Dr. Ferrer last week to not assume that we will have 100% of our students with access to vaccinations yet. We may still have families that are not ready. So we would need to put some dollars aside. Very similar. This actually item is almost copied from the LCP, the Learning Continuity Plan, where we provide the devices and the hotspots if needed, so they have the connectivity and the right teaching and learning tools to be able to learn remotely if that's still what is needed. And next skill. And the last three, less costly, but not any less important, are, I suppose you could also consider this as part of the second one, supports that we do through the day, but it is a specific category to ensure that we have kids graduating and that we offer ample opportunity for credit recovery, including an opportunity to complete college or career requirements. And so money put aside to support and supplement what we already do for credit recovery there. Number 6, I think this is the catch-all, but additional academic services. We've chosen right now to put that's where that maybe distance learning will go. And as we spent an incredible amount of supports this year, getting the HBIS and our elementary school distance learning platform ready to go, that would not be an added development expense next year, which is one of the reasons that we did it, in case we wanted to be able to utilize that program moving forward. So small amounts of cost there with that potential option. And lastly, after all of these sessions and everything that we plan on doing, how do we best support our staff to make them ready and prepared for themselves to better help kids as they return to school full-time, 5 days a week, all day next year in August. And so with that, I know we're going to open it up in just a couple minutes to all of your comments and questions. Are there any pressing questions before Keith does his last slide?
Do you see any, Dr. Butler?
I am not at the moment.
I don't see any.
But I got a question.
I think that sounds like James.
It is.
Mr. Han?
Yeah, it's okay. So the question I have, Katie, thank you so much for the presentation itself. So what I need to know, okay, is what is your vision? You give us this and I still don't understand what you anticipate. I need to know what you are anticipating. So for example, the summer school, right? I don't buy summer school this year. Kids are not going to go to summer school. If it's going to be how it is right now, there is no way. They're done. They're tired. So the idea to expect that these kids are going to come to summer school, I think is short-sighted. This is what I'm saying. We have to look into the future and think, what does the future look like? All these planning, I'm asking the question is, let's be proactive. Let's base our decisions based upon what we think will happen in the summer and in the fall. I really don't, that's why we're spending 15.4 million for summer school. And I'm thinking, wait a second, I really don't think that many kids are gonna, on the LCFF for 2 summers, on the previous, on the ESSER 1 or whatever that was.
Well,
was 1.8, 1.8? How much was that again?
Well, we want to hear from you before we finalize the plan. So we're still doing our listening sessions and hearing from people, but so it's not the 15 million is the entire pot for all 7 of these categories next year, not just from one pot.
The 1.3, okay, 1.3, that's what it was. Thank you. And so my other question, my point is, again, is that we have to think about what does the fall look like, right? There's going to be distance learners. I don't see how that's not going to happen. So to me is, what is the plan? Are we going to have it where because my thing is, one of the things that I was very surprised that was not added in educational services is technology. Is technology for the future? Because some things we've done this year are here to stay. I don't see how they're not here to stay. So maybe we have to create a distance learning school for all the distance learners, just clump them in that one school, or a strategy behind that, because we know there's going to be distance learners. So what is the strategy behind it? You had $1 sign for that, for additional academic support, whatever, for distance learner options, right? And you said that's what probably that distance learner school will go into. To me, that's going to be a substantial cost. I think that if we create a substantial, a robust digital school, a distance learning school, that's what we think is going to happen, then we need to put investment in that. We just can't do it just like we're just doing it just to get through the year. My thing is, if this is what we believe is here to stay, then we need to put some investment in this. My thing is, I just don't know what you guys are thinking the future looks like. I don't know what you guys are thinking next 2001 fall looks like. Do you guys really, what's the percentage of kids you think are coming back? 80%, 70%? Because a lot of the decisions that we're going to make is based upon what you guys think the fall is going to look like. And I just don't know what you guys think. I know what I want the fall to look like, but I don't know what you guys are thinking the fall is going to look like.
So there's a survey going to go to parents tomorrow, and it's going to ask if they had to decide now, 5 days a week in person or online, what's their selection. And because we want to know, and that's this planning process, we want to know based on grade level, region of the city, whatever it is, where are those students that parents are likely to select full distance learning? Because I agree, and the virtual school idea we've been talking about for 10 years, and we finally have some money and resources to be able to do it. So we want to do it not just for our current students, but we're also talking about how do we engage those families that maybe they are already at online charters, maybe they're at some private schools. How do we bring them back? Because each of them are assets for the district to have in many ways. And so if we vary our options, then we might be able to be, I've talked about this demand. We need to create a demand for our product. We need to create the demand for TUSD, whatever that looks like. We've got the dual immersion program and other things, but yes, so we will get that initial data within a week or so from our families, because if it's 2% of our families, or if it's 20%, that's going to differ in how we approach the problem or the issue.
That's exactly my point. You're asking us to create this and talk about this budget. I just don't know what the fall looks like to you guys. I know what I would like to see in the fall. That affects the way that we budget, right? If we know, let's say 30% say, you know what, we're going to go distance, then you know what, this is going to change. The budget is going to change, how we're going to allocate the funds, and it has to change because this is what the reality is, And so I'm just saying is that I need to know, when you guys make these decisions, you have to explain to us the backdrop of what you expect to see. Because obviously you created this budget, this plan, based upon what you guys are anticipating in the fall, right? I just don't know what that is. And you guys have not articulated that to me. I don't know how many students you think will be back, because you're making these budget proposals based upon some kind of assumption of what the fall will look like. And so that's what all I'm asking is, I hope that you guys can give us that information so that we understand how you address the issue based upon your assumptions.
So James, I think the clarifying piece, and I understand, is that presentation with that vision and plan will be at the May 17th board meeting. This is a plan we are in the process of writing, and more recently got the guidance that is due by June 1st. So think of this as an advanced planning session where we can hear your thoughts, and then you will get another presentation for us that will have specificity, much greater specificity in it, that will have, right now we're giving estimates because we still are hearing from people and listening to what their needs are, before we, write the entire plan. So think of this as like a pre-session before you hear the actual, plan in the board meeting in a month.
And I appreciate that. But again, I still need to understand what guided you to make these projections. You're asking us to feedback on your presentation without me understanding the assumptions that came into these plans. That's my question. You're asking me, I'm like flying in the blind. I'm getting what you guys told me. This is what your plan is. You're asking our feedback on your plan when I don't understand what the assumptions were behind this plan. Like, are you anticipating 80% students returning, 20%? What is the how many people are really falling back? That we got to invest this much money into this because this many kids have lost learning. You're just throwing numbers out there without giving me any parameters. So for example, loss mitigation. How many kids have lost? So that we're going to invest this much money into this when I don't even know how many students. But you do. You have an assumption. You have an assumption of what when you talk about 30 million out of, how much was that pot right now? This 30 million, right, out of the 50 million. You're spending this money based upon some projection. I just don't know what that projection is, because that will help me to say, oh yeah, that's a good amount. That's a good amount. Oh, that's not a good amount, because I know what you are assuming. But I may disagree based upon what you're assuming will happen in this fall. So therefore my projections and my feedback will not be based upon your assumptions, but based upon my assumption. I'm going to say, you know what, this is completely off. Do you see what I'm saying? That's what's hard for me. You're asking me to make a comment on these numbers when I don't even know what your assumptions are regarding the fall.
And I don't know if we need numbers so much as ideas of listening to the, some of the ideas and the plans in general. Like, for example, the mental health piece, as I talked about, we've gotten pages and pages of ideas from people of what they think that either their own selves, the students, or the parents have said that they think that their own students need, and they would like to see us consider those things as we're doing our planning. So will we spend money on mental health? Yes, I anticipate we're going to spend a nice chunk of money on mental health services. But hearing from you today, whether or not you have specificity in there or ideas within that category, I think maybe first and foremost, I think the biggest plan is getting the most kids we can back to school all day, every day, full day in the fall. That is probably the biggest chunk of money. Anticipating what the DPH guidelines may be in the fall and making sure that we still follow that guidance and do whatever we can do so we don't have limitations on returning all of our kids that want to be back in school next fall or August.
And that's where that reduced class size number comes in.
Mm-hmm. And Dr. Gerson, you had a question?
Well,
comments.
I'll agree with Mr. Hahn on one thing, that I don't like being sandwiched in the middle of the listening sessions. I'd like to be at the end of the listening session so that we have the benefit of that information. But I do disagree with Mr. Hahn on the this is the opportunity, or before this meeting, to ask Cabinet for that data in which we need to be able to make our decisions and be able to establish that vision. So I appreciate Cabinet for giving us the opportunity to lead the way and to give you the priorities that we have as you create your plan for us. But I do have some questions that came up over the course of and I know we're waiting to discuss ventilation till later, but one of the first things I picked up on is I want to say a positive. Adding the additional crossing guards, thank you for doing that, and thank you for working with the city. And thank you to the city for also throwing in some money to help us with that. I'm glad that we could help them as well. I think that's great. On the question of, well, you guys brought up nutrition. This isn't exactly with the money. We're still being reimbursed for the meals that we provide?
We are, and actually we're getting close to being able to actually turn a profit because of serving so many meals this year.
So I had a parent raise the question to me that we adjusted our hours and locations as far as when people can pick it up. Do we have any information on those families most in need if we've made it inconvenient, more inconvenient for them to be able to get the meals that they need?
We've actually been either growing at certain points and then reaching stability at the numbers that we're serving. So we're serving over 43,000 meals right now per week. So we haven't seen any drop off in terms of participation, the number of meals served. We don't know if there are some that are not being able to get it because of the locations where they are, but we haven't received any negative feedback to that regard through principals or directly to nutrition services. We have received one this week with nutrition services that we might have made a mistake and given chicken on too many Mondays in a row that affects the A cohort. And I'm not saying that as a joke. I'm just saying we're open to getting the feedback, and people have no problem giving us feedback. So we will be mixing in some beef, I think, on Mondays.
Well, good. I'm glad you're getting that feedback. Are we only offering to families who are not in person? We're only offering between 9 and 11 for pickup? Is that what I'm hearing?
I honestly don't know. I'd have to look at that.
Could you look into timing and just make sure that that family schedules are being taken into account?
I bet you Kathleen has an answer and I just don't know it. So I'll be sure to get that out to the board.
Thank you so much. On summer school, I had a couple of questions. If we go that direction, will the MAP testing play a part in who has access to summer school? What kind of groups are we thinking would have access to? What would the length of time be? And would these be in person or both offered in person and virtual? Can you just give me an idea of what this might look like?
Yes. So I think there's a consent item tonight on the agenda for summer school that goes through a list in a little bit more specificity, but the first big piece of I'm calling it acceleration summer school is from June 21st to July 22nd. There's concurrent ESY, which is our special education students. There's also our English learner summer school that's specific to our English learners and with a strong reading focus. And then our summer school that will offer K-12 it's going to look a little bit different in each grade level. At the elementary level, K2's focus is on language arts and reading, utilizing the results. We don't have the end of the year data yet, but they will be doing, this is predominantly based on their reading comprehension levels and past data that we know that this is where we have to give kids additional assistance in language arts. They will be in summer school 4 days a week for 5 weeks, doing academic work for 2 hours a day. The other 2 hours a day are going to be 5 different elective enrichment options to work on their re-engagement into school, their social emotional work. They will have a different 2-hour block every day of the week. So for the example, we're working with the YMCA to do the play sports program. Our counselors are going to do a social emotional mindfulness session. We've got even some of our high school theater arts teachers and kids that are going to be doing a theater arts. We have a visual arts component and a STEM component that we're working on so that kids would get that enrichment. Those would predominantly be outside, where the 2-hour core course would be inside. And kids would weave through and get these enrichment experiences, but also this is time to communicate with each other and be able to have that social engagement that they have been missing for so long. Middle school is very much similar in the middle with a very similar model to the elementary is the plan, with also some acceleration options. We've spoke to you before, and we've got plans in place to do some acceleration opportunities to get our unduplicated students and our students that are underrepresented in taking those summer geometry courses. So they're actually accelerating in their coursework. having those 8th graders take a summer geometry so that they could start in Algebra 2. Also having our middle school kids take a course that prepares them to take an English 1 honors, and other things like that. And these are parts of that DEI board workshop that we talked about, where we want to provide those opportunities for our underrepresented students, especially when we looked at some of the AP data, if we remember that. And then high school, kind of a combination of all of this as well, the credit recovery, but also their acceleration options, including dual enrollment options for having El Camino courses that count for high school courses. So lots and lots and lots of options in this kind of June 21st to July 22nd summer school time for us to be able to work on both the mental health, social, emotional well-being of them and their academic needs. And then the second piece is specific to school sites. The orientations that are going to be expanded upon, additional kind of elective enrichment kind of courses. All of this is kind of geared on getting kids used to coming back to school and being on campus and being able to take something that maybe expose them to an elective course that they haven't been able to be exposed to, moving forward. So we talked actually in tomorrow's principal meeting, our elementary principals are looking at a new piece of research, actually by the same company that does our MAP test, talking about the extreme variance that kindergarten and first grade students, that the teachers are going to have in the fall. And so how can we utilize, summer opportunities for kids who haven't been in preschool coming to kindergarten, for kids who have, not gone to kindergarten. We know nationwide and in the state, there's parents that just didn't send them. And so those kinds of things. And so I think there's really a huge amount of summer offerings being planned, if approved, that sites are that district-wide and sites are planning on providing.
Thank you. This evening during the regular board meeting, if you would throw something in about who's going to have access, will parents be allowed to sign their kids up? I'm hearing from some elementary parents concerns about, is this just for special ed, or will my child be able to attend? So if you could just touch on that during the regular board meeting tonight before we vote on it.
Yeah, so you have to pull it, it's on consent. And then I can comment on it. I will say that there's a limiting factor, and that is the number of teachers that will agree to teach summer school. So in fact, we got that information, like we have 81 elementary teachers willing to teach just regular summer school. That's not considering any special ed or any of the English learner academies. So
this is separate from SBEA, right?
SBEA is not board, but that's fee-based for families through the Torrance Ed Foundation. That's not.
Just making sure.
No.
I didn't write that number down. Does anybody have that number so I can pull it tonight?
What number are you asking about? Oh, the board. I'll pull it up when we're done and I'll text it to you, Jeremy.
15.4.
Oh,
all right.
Oh, you're good.
Quick question on that though. Is there a reason why we call it summer program, not summer school? That's very misleading. You guys put summer program. That's why when you guys talk about summer school, I didn't see summer school on the agenda, but you guys put it as summer programs for 2021. You make it sound like it's some kind of outdoor program. It's not like school. Look at the agenda. 15.4 says approval for summer programs. So that's why when you guys keep back to that summer school, I had no indication that we're going to be talking about summer school today. Just FYI.
Okay.
Would it help if we were to say summer academic programs? Would that be more clear? Because I think we don't want to be confused with summer school from SBEA. That's my concern. Any other wording suggestions would be welcome.
Well, because also we're asking there for student orientations, that's not necessarily school. So the text of the item itself reads that approval be given, or that this year we'll be offering K-12 summer school program. So in the title, it could have said summer school and other programs or something like that. Sure.
So, Dr. Crumpy, I love that you have the class size listed as a conversation. So, think about some of the research that clung to over the years is, the importance of math in high school, and the level at which you achieve in math is the best predictor of completion of college. But as far as high school completion, reading is, of course, the most important factor that has been found. And we know that kids who are behind exiting third grade are at the greatest risk to drop out. So with class size, being able to, in combination of creating the safest environments we can and getting as many students back in the classroom, I love the idea of being able to hire more teachers and getting, K through 3 down to that 15 maximum. That to me, I'd love that idea because of the benefits academically, catching kids up and making sure that they're good readers by the end of third grade. And then those who already passed third grade and fourth grade, really looking at, our reading intervention program and making sure that we are helping those students that to make sure that we catch them up if they have fallen behind during this period. To me, that going through that, the fact that that's an option, I love that. I think that meets so many needs. If we have the money to do that, I would love to hear more about that. And then Mr. Hahn also brought up the last thing I have on my list, which is I put up, that we do not currently have a virtual academy. And I completely agree with Mr. Hahn that I don't necessarily think that we should define it by how many virtual learners we have by school, but that we look at it as a district as a whole, as a cost-based item, as a more efficient item, that we do look at setting up some form of virtual academy for all of those who would like to remain home and remain as distance learners. So I love that idea. I've written it down too. So the class size, looking at that, and the distance learning academy, to me, are two of the biggest ideas that I would love to hear more about. Thank you.
Board Member Park?
Following on to Dr. Gerson's comments, I was concerned about hiring more teachers, about the sustainability of it. So if we end up hiring more teachers, but we need to spend the funds by latest 2024, does that mean we're going to fire all of the new teachers that we've hired in 2024? So just kind of curious what your thoughts were there, Dr. Gerson. And so I think throughout all of the points that were made, the word that was sticking to my mind is sustainability. So I'd like, for priority for me, I'd like to make sure that we are investing in training and building internal capacity rather than more of outsourcing and potentially spending a bunch of money that and getting services for a short period of time that's not going to help us sort of in the long run. And then that may lead to more disruption and dissatisfaction for the students in the longer term. So just wanted to make sure that that was top of mind in any of the proposals that come through. I really appreciated the idea of a wellness center or safe spaces for really being able to invest in, sorry, there are toddlers screaming outside if you can hear that. If we could invest in addressing our need for mental health and counseling supports through some sort of center. I think that's a wonderful idea from one of the respondents from the consultations you've done. Along with that, I would like to make sure that, especially in the current conversations, that we're also addressing race-based stress and trauma, so that we're not just looking at anxiety or just the other sort of mental health conversations that we've been having, but also really looking at what are supports that we can bring in for race-based stress and trauma. And also for like making sure that we are working on digital skills. I talked about this sometimes, but yeah, really for in addition to mobile hotspots and building some sort of communications hub that's like that's the physical infrastructure. I think that's really important, but I think that again, in terms of sustainability and investing in our capacity as a district, making sure that we are also investing in curriculum or different capacity, whether it's our existing staff or additional staff, people who are able to bring in the expertise of how do you teach digital citizenship and literacy. So it's not just, you know, the technical side of things, but more on the ethics side of like the world that they're going to be entering into. How are we bringing in that expertise to incorporate into students' learning? And I know that we haven't really gone to the admin services end, but a huge thing for me is communications. I'd like to make sure that we are investing in building our capacity as a district with our communications. So if Gil and Tammy could work together on a wish list of like capacity and tools that would really help our district better communicate with the public, with our different stakeholder groups, whether those that would entail a revamped website or helping our individual schools also better utilize the different tools at their disposal. That is something that, especially with what we've just gone through, I think we have that would lead to more efficiency. Potentially we could do surveys or get public input in a more effective and efficient manner if we were able to better utilize our communications channels. So with that, yeah.
Can I respond to Ms. Park?
Yeah, go ahead. And then afterwards, let Vice President Han go, and then Dr. Mohammed after Han.
No, I think Ms. Park brings up a very important point about sustainability, because you are 100% correct. It is because these are one-time monies, it is not long-term sustainable. But, you know, talking about Mr. Han's risk versus reward, the attention that those students receive, that per minute, per day that each child has for each teacher, because when you have 30, you know, kids in a class and you're, you know, and you only have a, you know, few minutes, you know, per kid versus having, you know, 4 or 5 times as many minutes with that kid per week, what you can accomplish with that student is just so great. You know, there were so many students over the years who were like, oh, Mr. Gerson, you know, if I would vote to pay you more, and I would tell them, thank you so much, I appreciate that. I don't need more pay. I need more teachers because I want more time with you and what I can do with you if I just had more minutes with you. And I think teachers who haven't had that experience, that we're starting to hear feedback from those who are going, wow, I'm in a class of 12 now. Look at what I'm accomplishing, and they're amazed at what they could do. So while it's not sustainable for us, and while it's only a 2-year thing, in which case our students will get so much benefit from, the long-term advantage is twofold. One is you have all of these wonderful teachers, and you are going to get to pick which ones you keep permanently and which ones you don't. So you are going to get to pick from the best based on 2 years of observing them in a classroom. Because normally we don't always get a full 2 years before we're making those decisions, because they've already moved from that temporary to probationary. And so it is an opportunity for administration to get more time with those teachers. And I think that Torrance will also have the opportunity to train these teachers. So even if they don't stay with us, Torrance Unified is going to have a benefit that's going to be shared with other districts when these teachers leave us to move to other districts. So I just wanted to go, while you are 100% correct that these are not sustainable, there are other benefits to it that I wanted to share that I think are positives. Thank you.
Vice President Han?
Just a quick comment. So one thing I noticed that on the funds, it's everything future. But how about now? I feel like we've already given up on the idea of bringing these kids back 5 days a week. And I don't want to give up on that idea yet. I think that if we can anyhow, any way to bring these kids back 5 days a week, then we ought to. Let's start now. I don't know why we wait for the summer. I think that if we can get the kids back 5 days a week now, I think it'll be a huge asset, whether it be elementary, I'm not talking about everyone, just whatever is workable. I think that if we start now, I think that we would enhance the process for the fall. So I just noticed that everything is either spent or is projected for the future, but I wish that we don't give up the idea that somehow, some way, we bring these kids 5 days a week now.
Dr. Mohammed.
Thank you so much, President Liu. I concur with a lot of what my colleagues are saying. That's something that's kind of come up just with me and in my conversations is and I appreciate the fact that Dr. Kirby kind of highlighted some of these things in your presentation, and that is one of the extended school day. I know we talk about summer and we talk about summer programs and sessions and things like that, but I think it is also important to make sure that we have opportunities for engagement during the day, during the school year as well. So I do like that idea that's been brought up. And secondly is the mental health support. So I know that that's part of your slide, and that's been a very important topic as well for many. And so I wanted to make sure that that's been highlighted. Technology is another one that, especially now and with what we've kind of gone through and seen over the pandemic, I think having that emphasis in technology and making sure that we have enough and that we invest more in it, I think it's going to be critical as we move forward because there's a lot of different areas that we can go into. We just talked about, whether it be virtual academies or whatever it might be. So I think having that, not only the tools, but even the infrastructure there. So I think that's going to be very important going forward. Credit recovery with some of our secondary to make sure that we have opportunities for them to be successful in whatever way it needs to be, to making sure that those opportunities are there for some of our high school students. Other areas that I think I just wanted to touch on, one is making sure that there's a lot of money being given to districts. A lot of it is one-time money. We get that. But I think it's extremely important to make sure that, and my colleagues talked about it, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but just to underscore the point of efficiency, that we don't just spend money for the sake of spending money, when we spend money because there's going to be that we're spending in the right areas, and that we're measuring it, and that we are getting a quality return for it, whether it be in whatever areas that we want to invest in. So just carefully reviewing what we do, how we do it, assessing it, and making sure that we're spending the dollars in the right way. Because that also then goes into the sustainability factor that we also talked about. Like, can we, if it's a really good program that we would like for it to continue, then now would be a time to also plan to see how we can sustain it once these one-time money goes out too. So thinking a little bit more on the long run with that. I think, I really like what we've got. I know, again, there is a lot of these money coming in, but the other area that I don't want to lose focus on, and that's just to kind of piggyback from our last meeting that we had on diversity, equity, and inclusion, is to make sure that we also don't lose sight on some of our underperforming groups, that whatever we choose to do, wherever we try to invest and spend our money on, that we always have that focus on some of our low performing groups to make sure that, are we providing them the extra support that they need? Do we have those intervention strategies, right, in whatever area it is? Whether it be technology, mental health, extended school day, or credit card, whatever it is, that we don't lose sight and focus on that area. Last but not least, making sure that there's a lot of different things that are going on, that we also invest in our staff, both classified and certificated, to make sure that they have the training and support needed in order to be successful as well, right? Because there's a lot of different things that whether a custodian can learn or pick up on, or grounds maintenance, or some of our HVAC groups or teams or teachers, right? So we just need to make sure that we invest a little bit in their training and development. Those were my comments. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Mohammed. A lot has been said on this already, and I agree with a lot of my all my fellow board members. They all brought up very good points. I especially like that there are a good portion of the funds are going to mental health, and the summer programs. Well, as you guys know, summer mental health being one of my top 3 priorities, and the summer programs I believe is greatly needed, especially this summer more than any other summers, to help enhance the learnings of the students. I love that Board Member Park brought up sustainability, and Dr. Gerson also agreed. we really need to look into that about hiring more teachers. The idea is great. We always want to have more teachers, but what's going to happen afterwards? How we're going to sustain it? And I believe one of the reasons why we seem to have more money than other districts per student is because of our Title I students, or our free and reduced lunch students. Yes, thank you, Dr. Butler. I see you're agreeing. And so as Dr. Mohammed has brought up, we need to also make sure to bring up our underprivileged students and try to do more help for them. And in the meanwhile, I have a question about the AB 86. Some of those funds is it that we need to spend them by June? I forgot if it's end of June or 1st of June that you guys have
August.
stated.
End of August 2022. So we have all through next year, and then we have to spend them by the end of August.
That's for 7422 funds. How about 7426 and 7425 funds, the first two that you guys listed?
I got to go back, sorry.
It's okay.
No problem, I can take that. So
thank you.
all of the AB 86 has to have a plan into the state by June 1st. In fact, I think I could have set this whole conversation up a little bit better by saying that the parts that we really need to make sure we get dialed in are the ones that have a June 1st plan. And so that's the compressed time frame. We want to come to you as soon as we can to say, what do you want? What do you think is the best plan going forward? And then we do our listening with the rest of the community that we will, and then we come back with a plan for you actually to approve. So sorry for not giving a good context with that. But in terms of these here, we just need to have the plan in place. So for example, it's interesting how this works. The 6.9 million for 7422, it's got to be in as part of the plan. We are able to show that we have already spent a lot of money on doing in-person instruction during this year. It was just part of our operation. It was just paying teachers. Some of them were in person. So for this year, the current year that we're in right now, there is no audit guide requirements around how you tee up AB 86. So we're going to be able to say we did spend that money on instruction this year, but you're going to see that 6.9 million set aside into a reserve that's held until we decide exactly how we really want to spend it going forward, which goes back to the administrative services slide that we didn't quite get to yet. But one chunk of that is with the work that we're doing in ventilation. Until we do a real survey of where we are with our facilities right now, our ventilation, our HVAC, we need to do the best about spending some one-time money. Less than a quarter of this is for ventilation, PPE, furniture, anything we might be doing that way. 3/4 of it, and it should be, is on the instructional side that Dr. Crumpy's talking about. But for these monies that we're spending, once we have a plan, we'll know how do we optimize the existing HVAC that we have for the long run. Good idea to spend some one-time money towards that for repairs that will pay for themselves for a long time. Where can we upgrade? For example, I used the whole example earlier. Is there something to do with mechanical air, not air conditioning or heating? But is there something to do with the buildings at a place like Hull that can put mechanical air, increase the number of air exchanges, have it flow through the bipolar ionization to clump up any bad particles in there, and then good filtering? So even if you're not adding heat to the air or AC to the air, is there something that we can do to increase airflow through a unit that will make that air cleaner for students and the staff that are in those classrooms? So I want to start with doing a good survey of where we are, find everything that needs to be repaired, start taking the steps as well towards a centralized energy management system that's going to do a good job making the most efficiency out of all of our existing air handling equipment that we have. And then the whole point of talking about being able to set some of this aside right now, then to come back to you at some point and say, here's how much we spent to maximize what we have. Here's what's left. Would you like to explore additional AC perhaps where we don't have it right now? But that's the last piece of where we get to before we spend money to maximize the efficiency of what we have for the long run. So that just gives you a little window into kind of how, at least on the admin side, we're thinking about it. And then in addition to that, what's not on the slide, but I don't want to tip my hand too much for negotiations, but I believe, and 845 is asking for, we need to do more with professional development for our classified staff across all categories, all individuals, whether that's safety training in the areas that need that a little bit more for slips, trips, and falls, lifting, and the kinds of things that can lead to workers' comp injuries, whether it's making sure to do more with customer service and a real service mentality for those front-facing occupations that I think could use some of that additional training and follow through. Or whether it's just understanding where individuals are on their career path and what can we do to help our classified staff move forward, even though we don't have the same defined pathways that we might for our teaching staff. So there are ways to get creative and do some more chunks here. We do plan to do it, but part of what we're constrained by is that first part about having to have a plan for AB 86 by June 1st. So that's part of what we're working on here. And then one other quick thing I saw in the chat. Oh, how can I clarify the 17 million? I get 15.4. Are you talking about for what we've already spent so far? Talking about, okay, got it. There is a little bit of rounding that happens, but it wouldn't be more than $1 million.
Dr. Butler, I from the first 3 slides, I was able to get 15.7. I know you're estimating about 17 million. I just wasn't sure if we're missing a different category that perhaps I overlooked or something, but I just wanted to clarify that.
All the categories are there. I'll make sure to double check that, and along with the information on food services. I kind of triple check stuff, and I think my numbers are right, but let me double check and get it back to you. So 17 mil spent versus 15.7. Okay, got it. So in general, as you can see, though, just to put a bow on it for the administrative services side, find out where do we stand in ventilation, start doing the work to fix it, get a centralized emergency management system, energy management system, and then look at what we can do for professional development for classified. I think that those would be the items that coming from the team in administrative services, we think there can be some value there. Very much interested in your feedback.
Thank you, Dr. Butler. I think there was a slide that you showed up, that you put up for a little bit. I don't know what's on there. I don't recall. Did you cover all those things?
I think I got just about all of them. Yeah.
Yes. Survey and
HEPA filters, modernized. Yep.
Yes.
Mechanical fan or filter, maybe. Yep. Thank you.
I see that you did. Thank you very much. And thank you for speaking fast, because we have gone past the allotted time for this meeting and it's going into our next meeting. So anything else from anybody?
I had a very quick.
We're right on schedule. We got 5 minutes before the next one starts.
Yeah, I just had a very quick question about our energy management system related to being efficient with our energy. Have we looked at all into solar panels on our schools and relying, on sort of, just with the
no problem. We have done 3 studies, I believe, within the last 8 years, something to that effect, that have looked at different varying degrees into what we might be able to do with solar. It just hasn't worked out to be a great cost benefit yet to do it with the additional risk of adding arrays onto roofs that the ideal time would have been as we built new buildings, did it pencil out and make sense to do that. But the solar market has not been super kind to the school districts that, let's call it 10 years ago, put in the power purchase agreements. And they locked in what they would pay for electricity, what the cost of the systems would be. And I've only heard of a handful of districts that ended up on the right side of those. So it wasn't a great program back then, but every year solar gets more efficient and better, and there's better battery capabilities. So again, the last study we did was 2 or 3 years ago, and I can see doing another one in the next year or so, and just seeing have we reached that point where it really makes sense to do it. Now, these are all considerations outside of what's best for the planet. And that's a whole separate conversation, which I agree with. But we also have to make sure it pencils out just from an economic point of view for the district as well. So we will do another full study on that in the not too distant future.
Thank you, Dr. Butler. I'm glad you're continuing to look into that. My understanding was there will be a lot of infrastructure support needed right now if we were to put the solar panels on, because they're so heavy and whatever, and the prices are not the they're still pretty high right now, but even though they've gone down a lot in the last several years. Okay, if there is nothing else, anybody else have anything? Okay, Dr. Stowe, are you good?
Yep. So I appreciate your input, and again, we're going to bring this back to you. And Dr. Gersten, we have a very short timeline for the state planning, and so calendar-wise, we ultimately would like the board to be the final listening session on this, but we have a very condensed timeline and challenging to find available dates to meet with various groups. So I apologize for you all getting sandwiched in between those groups. But we will bring back on the 15th or 17th. Again, we have our listening session, or not listening session. We have the board workshop on the LCAP on the 12th. And so that will be another opportunity for us to talk about, with the board, what are these big things that that you would all like to see us be doing, and how does that fit into the overall plan? So I definitely appreciate your input.
Just FYI, I will be bringing up today in our board meeting about using some of those funds now for bringing back our students today. Just FYI, just so that you don't get shocked. Because again, it is something that has to be discussed. And like I said, I don't want to wait till May 15th because we have to get approved then. We're never gonna get these kids back. And so it's a discussion, and just kind of giving you a heads up before our open session today.
And I can also answer Dr. Mohammed's question. Thank you, Dr. McDowell. The GEAR LLM money, the 1.3 million there, it's not spent, but it is encumbered. We know that we're going to spend it on this summer, and a slide got changed in there, and I did not catch that piece. I should have spoken to spent/encumbered, and GEAR is part of that. So thank you for helping me out there.
VP Han, I just want to let you know that it's my duty to state that what's not agendized should not be discussed, but you can ask if it's under the interim superintendent's report. You feel free to ask things in a question form to Dr. Stowe. But otherwise, under the Brown Act, we're not really supposed to discuss. You can say you can ask questions. Is that
Yes,
good?
it will be under his superintendent report when he talks about schools.
Right. Okay, good. I'm glad you understand. All right, if nothing else, we should move into our next meeting, our closed session. Anyone want to move for adjournment for this meeting?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Sure.
Aye.
Okay. Motion passes unanimously. See you guys soon.
Thank you.
Meeting's adjourned.